Karen, why don't we begin by your explaining what led you and your board to launch this rebranding effort?
Sure, Doug. But before I do that, maybe just a brief word about the Mineta Transportation Institute. We're actually a federally funded university transportation center that was competitively selected by the U.S. Department of Transportation. We specialize in surface transportation research, technology transfer, education, and workforce development. And so it's with that in mind that we thought we really needed to look at our branding and see if we needed to make some tweaks. I say that because the Institute was founded 25 years ago. And of course, over the last couple of decades, the nature of transportation, the work that we do here at the university has evolved. And what we found was it was time to just refresh what our mission was, what our colors were, what our logo looked like, how our mission worked, and to work closely with our board to talk about our core values so that we had something we could present to elected officials, academics, practitioners, transit agencies, all of the stakeholders that we work with that clearly aligned with what we are currently doing. So when I was meeting with my board in June of 2017, this topic came up, and there seemed to be some real energy behind the idea of making sure that we were branded more closely as a part of San Jose State University. Now let me be a little bit more specific about that. We are part of the Lucas College and Graduate School of Business at San Jose State University, which is the heart of the Silicon Valley here in the state of California. But we had really developed much more of an independent identity, if you will. But in talking with my board, we realized it was critically important that the Institute, which is more informally known as MTI, the acronym, was seen as a part of the fabric of the university, in large part because we are actually, in calendar year 27, the largest grant recipient at San Jose State University. So we received more funds, for example, than the College of Engineering, the College of Business, and others. So we wanted people to see that we're good Spartans, we have a lot of pride. And with that in mind, the board, a small working group, was identified, and we realized where our colors have historically been, blue and green, that we really needed to even tweak those so that they were Spartan blue and gold to match with the logo and the branding efforts of the university at large.
So why don't you tell us a bit more about the process you went through in this rebranding effort? What were the main steps, and what kind of structure did you use for this process?
Sure. Well, the conversation initially started at the board meeting in June, and once we realized there was some energy behind that and that the board endorsed this action, we put together a small working group of board members that I could interact with to really flesh out the details of the type of changes that we wanted to make, to come up with a vibrant and compelling mission statement, and to talk about just logo preparation, if you will. As it happens, a number of people on our board have engaged in their own rebranding efforts, so they have some personal experience there, and some have actually worked very closely with the media over the years, so they had some insight in that regard as well. So we originally talked about, with the logo, for example, we wanted to have the acronym, which is how the Institute is best known, but we also wanted it to say Mineta Transportation Institute because we want to honor Secretary Mineta, our founder, who remains deeply engaged in all of the Institute's activities. And so we thought, okay, we need a combination of those two things. We knew we wanted the colors to be the blue and gold of the university, so that part was easy. So when we came up with some mock-ups for the logo, we presented it to the small working group of the board, and they had great recommendations. Something as minor as the MTI acronym was just a bold, straight up and down font. And they said, why not slant it, which would give you that nod to the transportation angle because it sort of shows movement, which is a relatively minor comment that made such a substantial difference in the final outcome and look. And so we said, yes, that's a great idea. And we didn't present all of the logo options to the full board. Rather, we really quelled it down to two that the small working group endorsed, and then we presented that for final consideration. Importantly, a step along the way was to meet with the communications department at San Jose State University to present our idea and to make sure that our companion logo, which is what the MTI logo is referred to, fit well with the typeface and the structure of the San Jose State logo at large. So we had a number of meetings about that. And then secondly, I engaged the work of a professional outreach manager to help us have small stakeholder interviews to talk about the impact that Mineta Transportation and the work that we do has had on the transportation industry, has had on the nonprofit world, and on academia, so that we could take those insights and really come up with not only the mission, but identify how MTI's mission works in the real world, what our vision is, and how we identify ourselves with our core values, who reflect who we are as people, educators, researchers, business partners, and importantly, leaders in the transportation field.
So you actually dealt with some classic strategic planning elements, vision,
Yes.
values, mission, and were vision, values, and mission actually updated as part of this process?
Absolutely. We still had the founding mission of the Institute, which my predecessor at that time put together, and it reflected the goals of where we were at. But since some time has passed, we just realized that it was time to refresh on all levels. And that included sitting down and really identifying that mission and the values and how the core mission works. Those were not things we had in place prior to this rebranding effort.
Now, did you do this with this working group, or did you have some sort of intensive board sessions around it? How did you come up with an updated mission?
Well, it was a two-pronged approach, in large part driven by the small working group of the board, and through the stakeholder interviews that we had conducted, because we felt we know what we do, we know what our goal is, but how are we perceived? And maybe with the stakeholders' perceptions taken into account, it might help the language, for lack of a better word, be more dynamic and vibrant and more personable.
Great idea.
Thank you.
It makes good sense. You know, quite often over the years I've seen rebranding efforts that don't deal with fundamental strategic questions like, what is our vision for the future? What are our core values? What are the key elements of a mission statement? So you really took then a very deep as well as comprehensive approach, right?
We really did, Doug. That was important to us. We didn't want to make changes in a vacuum. We wanted to include the board and our key stakeholders. We see ourselves as really filling a need, not only within academia, but within the transportation industry as a whole. And our mission needed to reflect how deeply committed we are. So kind of off the cuff, our vision, and my vision personally, is that mobility for all is critically important, not only from a social justice perspective, but having and lacking opportunities for mobility are no different than having and lacking opportunities, period. If you can't reach places of employment, medical appointments, social activities, you can become isolated and not realize your full potential. So we realize that to move is to live, and through our research, education, technology transfer, and workforce development activities, we help ensure that our system is safe, efficient, accessible, and convenient for our entire nation, and that's critically important to us.
Now, at the end of this, you went through, over what period did you work with this working group? How many months did you spend?
The initial conversation started in June of 2016, and we rolled out the new brand in January of 2017.
Okay. And I assume when you say roll out, you had presented it to the board as a package?
That's exactly right. Now, one correction. I believe I may have said earlier in my comments that this happened in June of 2017. So I do want to specifically say it was June of 2016. And then we intensely worked on it for 6 months because our board meets twice a year, June and January of each year. And so we presented these new concepts to the full board at the beginning of January 2017.
Okay.
And once they endorsed all of the new changes we wanted to make, we rolled it out later that month.
Okay. Now, if this question makes sense, what in a nutshell is the new brand, the new look? Just kind of paint a picture for me of, at the end of this intensive planning process and rethinking process, what's the new brand?
So when you think about the Institute, we put out a lot of documents, a lot of research reports, a lot of policy briefs, white papers on current topics. We host conferences and workshops surrounding the latest findings to make sure that results reach the end users who are responsible for making changes. We felt that having a custom look that easily identified us across all those instances was important. So when I talk about the new brand, obviously it incorporated a color change, a logo change, but we rebranded everything we put out of our office. So for example, if you've got a researcher making a presentation based on a research project that was funded by MTI, that researcher will use our rebranded PowerPoint template. Or if they're presenting a poster, they will use our poster template. The reason being is that we contract with researchers globally. But we want, even if the researcher is based out of a university on the East Coast, we want people to easily see that that's an MTI-funded project, which was important to us. So that's how the rebranding effort manifests itself in the research area, if you will. We've also recreated all of the templates for policy briefs. So wherever you are in the world, if you saw those colors and that heading, you would know that it was a Mineta Transportation Institute document. We made sure that we worked with the university's communications department so that they were aware of all of the changes that we had. And so the new branding will always include the San Jose State University logo on the left, MTI's companion logo on the right, and will be coordinated in that way.
So really top to bottom.
Top to bottom, absolutely.
So in a sense, the brand manifests itself in a comprehensive communication template, if you will.
Perfectly stated.
Good. Well, this sounds like it was a very, very fascinating process. Now, you've got your brand in place. What are you doing to promote it? And what difference, if you can see a difference, has it made in your work to have rethought and rebranded who you are?
You know, that's a great question. Well, first, internally, I think it's actually helped with my team's morale. I think we have a clear picture of who we are and where we are going and how we contribute so incredibly positively to the transportation system in our nation. And when you get people behind that shared vision, it just seems that everybody's more devoted to their work. So that's an observation on my part, if you will. In terms of the impact I think it's had on our reputation at the university level, it appears at least that we're getting more media interviews coming from the San Jose State University Communications Department, that they're promoting our work more because now we have this inclusive image where before, and of course personalities change, so when leaders change, there's often a new way of going forward. I think that my vision of inclusivity is to make sure that my university that houses the Mineta Transportation Institute receives credit for the fine work that we're doing, to have the happy benefit of also building San Jose State University's reputation. I believe we reflect quite well on our academic home. And I'm seeing that as we work closely and we're showing that level of commitment to the university, they actually took more of a vested interest in the work that we're doing, saw how deeply committed we were, saw how effective we are in securing different grants and opportunities, and then made sure that we became more of an integral partner to the work that they're doing.
You know, it's interesting, from what you've said, in a sense, the Institute has gone from being a kind of outlier to an integral member of the university family. You've consciously associated the Institute with the university.
Yes.
And you're reaping benefits from that. I'm fascinated, too, by the morale part of this. I can't recall hearing others talk about the morale benefit of rebranding. That's really fascinating.
You know, I literally have goosebumps. I know that sounds kind of geeky. And at the end of the day, I am a scientist. We are researchers. But this is an observation that I think we all made because everybody was included in the process. We made sure that it seemed to read well to our internal family, our MTI family, that people had the opportunity to voice their thoughts, that they were engaged in the process. And the more that you engage your team, the more they feel that they have a voice, the more committed they become to the mission and the vision. Or at least in my opinion, that's how it worked here at our institute.
And also in a sense, I don't think you mentioned the cultural side of this, but this really was, in a sense, even transformational in terms of the culture of the Institute, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's not... I'm sorry?
I would say that. I think that's an accurate statement, Doug.
And, you know, so often we think of branding as a kind of cosmetic process, but you've gone much deeper than surface kinds of things. You've actually, by redefining yourselves, you've actually, in a sense, engaged in a kind of culture-building exercise.
Yes.
Very interesting. Well, Karen, I want to thank you for taking time from what I know is an extraordinarily busy, very hectic schedule to tell us about the Institute's rebranding initiative, which appears to have been highly successful. This has been very interesting, and I'm sure our listeners are going to feel that it's also very informative. So thank you very much, and I wish you a good weekend. I think it's Friday, isn't it? Yes,
it's Friday, and I'd like to thank you, Doug. We're so delighted with the work we do at the Mineta Transportation Institute. We honor Secretary Mineta, we honor our board members, and we are just thrilled to be doing the fine work that we are. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about some of the recent changes.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk about them, and once again, have a restful and rejuvenating weekend.